Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today for our webinar, The Drivers of Growth in the U.S. Innovation Districts, focusing on biotech, air and space, and clean tech. I am Vicki Palmer. I'm CEO with AURP, and I just want to welcome you all here today. And in honor of the International Women's Day, I just wanted to thank you for all of our female participants. And thank you for all the power and encouragement you provide to additional women. And I just encourage you to put your pictures in our chat feature today. So we're just a little bit about AURP. I know there's a number of individuals that aren't familiar with our organization, but AURP is a nonprofit organization, and we have two offices here in the U.S. One is in the Washington, D.C. area, which is Brian Darmody, waving there to you. And he's at the University of College Park, Maryland. And then Diana and I and Haley Bejarano, our new member of our team, we're in Tucson, Arizona at the University of Arizona Technology Park. So we represent about 40 plus states with universities, research parks, innovation districts, incubators, our whole community of innovation. So we have a wide breadth of membership, and we are again throughout the US, Canada, and the world. We are sponsored primarily by universities, federal labs, corporations, and really provide the place-based communities representing leading scientific and technology clusters. So again, AURP's mission is really bringing together our academia, industry partners, along with industry and government, really in a place-based economic community. And we've been doing that since 1986. So with our 200 plus institution membership, you know, we really represent, about 3 million faculty and students. And again, all those communities of innovation have over 10,000 companies with a minimum of 1 million knowledge workers throughout the world. So, you know, just as a look, here's our membership just, you know, throughout the US. You can see our clusters throughout, you know, heavily populated states. And you can definitely access our membership on our map on the website. So I encourage you to do that. But we represent R1, R2, national, federal labs, innovation districts, community colleges, and soon to be growing in HBCU, HSI, MSI, and other institutions. So I'll let you read this, but the average research park is about 119 acres, has 7 buildings open, 250,000 square feet, 90% occupied, and employs about 850 employees, excuse me, in those companies. But again, we have some that have 6,000. I think here at Tech Parks, they have about 6,000 employees. And I know that RTP in North Carolina has up to 30,000 plus, I believe. So a wide range of membership. So just looking here at some of our benchmarking report from a report that came out in 2018, you know, we have proven that research parks are really advancing industries and the tech-based industries, and that it leads over 23% over those outside at 8% of those research park communities. And you know, the largest sector is in the large metro and urban and suburban cores. 76% of those research parks do note that they have a significant impact on strengthening those regional industry clusters. And, you know, with every job that is employed within a research park, it leads and creates 1.34 additional jobs in that community. So the success rate, because of all the programming and the incubator programming that they have and the support systems they have within those research parks, that there's a 75% success rate, survival rate of those businesses versus 49 outside in the business community. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I welcome you all to our webinar today. I'm Vicki Palmer again, and let me get on to our speakers. So today we're going to be starting out with Aaron Koshu, our president of AURP and executive director of Cummings Research Park. And then we'll roll on to Brian Darmody, our chief strategy officer at AURP. And then we have our special guest speaker, Joe Perea, who is with Brookings Metro. So I will roll that over to Aaron. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vicki. I am delighted to share a little bit about the structure and information regarding our AURP caucuses. This is where those partnerships and networks around certain topic areas and industry focus areas really come into play. And they are at a variety of formation. We certainly have the most established caucus with the BioHealth Caucus, and then Air & Space and Clean Tech and Building Resiliency caucuses are just getting off the ground and building those networks to support different areas. The AURP BioHealth Caucus works on developing facilities to and for bio startup companies that help grow in that industry, but then also to partner with bio and pharma corporations and universities to take advantage of the enormous size and opportunity that this industry represents. And no better time to get involved with BioHealth Caucus than through the June 4th and 5th meeting there in Boston that precedes Big Bio. And there's a link there that you can go to, and they've got a very robust 2-day agenda, really all around biohealth facilities, startup support, and fostering those partnerships to grow that industry for our parks and our universities and members. And then, of course, really around biohealth, that sector, as we all have seen, certainly over the last 3 years, it is a growing sector. No reason to believe that that isn't going to continue to happen. And the generation of that particular sector is $3 trillion in economic impact. And there are many of our regions and our states that are a part of that economic impact and benefit from the growth of that industry. And we look forward to hearing more about that in Boston. So we hope you'll join us there. Then the Air and Space Caucus really works on developing that placemaking piece where the space industry can grow, perhaps already is growing, can grow, and where talent is developed both at launch sites and away from launch sites in places such as here in Huntsville, Alabama, where I am, in Florida, Utah, Kentucky, and Ohio, just to name a few states. And of course, the space industry, whether you're talking about commercial space or which was what most people, I think, frame of reference is, or you're talking about those that are in partnership and led with the government. And there is growth in this sector as well. I think that's probably the key thread throughout these caucuses is the growth around these sectors, and then our members and organizations across the country and research parks and innovation districts that can take advantage of this industry growth. And the space industry, of course, as we all see, is there as well in terms of growth and economic impact. And the Clean Energy and Building Resiliency Caucus is our newest caucus, and it really works on, again, developing those facilities, those partnerships, the facilities to house clean tech firms that are working on topics ranging from battery storage to advancements in fusion technology, facilities that can deploy the latest in energy efficiency and microgrids. And of course, our larger AURP members are, in essence, many cities, as we all see, without the bureaucracy you might find in a city. But those AURP members that are those mini cities and ecosystems can be used as test sites for new microgrids, as one example. And if you didn't know, we are having a reception in conjunction with the ARPA-E Summit in Washington, D.C. on March 23rd. So we would love for you to join us. That's really that kickoff of that caucus. And we look forward to having you join us if you happen to be attending the ARPA-E Summit. And I know Brian's very passionate about that and will likely speak to it as well. And then, from the Clean Tech and Building Resiliency Caucus, I mean, again, tying to that industry growth and that industry opportunity, you certainly have seen historic investment in federal climate spending, anticipate that to grow in the future. And so how can we take advantage of that to support the growth of our communities and our partnerships through research parks, innovation districts, and through our universities and industry? And then the great part about all three of these caucuses is that they really will advance and build through AURP's International Conference. And so we'll have programming addressing each of these caucuses at the AURP's conference, October 16th through 19th in Newark, Delaware. This is hosted by Star Campus and the University of Delaware. And we are developing right now what that programming looks like, and there'll be call for proposals that will go out for our sessions that will align into those caucus topics. And so please be mindful of that and keep an eye out for that. We'd love to have you join us and build the network around these 3 caucuses. And with that, I'll introduce Brian Darmody, the Chief Strategy Officer for AURP.
Thanks, Erin. Let's go on to the next slide. Looking forward to having a quick discussion. So we're going to be hearing from Brookings, and they're doing a lot of great work in sort of analyzing the opportunities for building tech clusters around the country. And this is just a quick summary of one of their reports. That over $1 trillion in place-based investments to extend tech innovation, in rural, suburban, and urban areas is from a combination of the variety of policies that have passed recently by Congress. So it's hard to keep track, and we're trying to keep track of the many opportunities. But and that'll be reflected in our event in Boston, at ARPA-E, and in Delaware this coming October. So next slide. So AURP re-released a white paper on the geography of technology, science, and innovation. It's on our website. You can take a look at this. And we borrowed a slide from McKinsey. So this just looks at the CHIPS and Science Act, which is one of the trifecta of major policies that came out. But you can see, and this is authorization, not appropriation. So this doesn't necessarily mean this level of funding will happen. But over the 5-year period, you can see the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, EDA, NIST, and NASA are all getting a certain amount of funding through, in this case, the CHIPS plus Science Act. Next slide. So we've also been working with the Federation of American Scientists. They have also been analyzing all these opportunities, and they released a pretty interesting paper. Cluster development is the new economic development. And that's certainly in alignment with what AURP has been doing since 1986. Next slide. So we mentioned ARPA-E. That happens to be meeting in the Washington D.C. area. So in the last, I think it's 9 years, ARPA-E, they've released over $3 billion in funding to largely small startups in the energy field. And because I'm located in College Park, Maryland, at the University of Maryland, and this is going to be at the Gaylord, which is about 20 minutes away from where I'm located, we're going to be attending there. So if anyone is going to be at ARPA-E, please look me up and we can, connect at the ARPA-E Summit. You can see over 2,100 attendees. The Secretary of Energy is going to be there, lots of other people. Next slide. And we're going to host a reception the evening of March 23rd. And then also there's another event, the Green Energy Innovation Expo, which is part of the Autumn Federal Lab Consortium in the United States Patent and Trademark Office. They're holding a Green Energy Innovation Summit May 17th. AURP is going to be there. We're going to have a table. If you happen to be in the area, feel free to sign up for that as well. And we can send you the link if you can't get a hold of that. And then I'm going to be speaking at the Federal Lab Consortium meeting on how federal labs can build communities of innovation. This is March 29th in the afternoon, and I have some folks representing NSA, NASA, and RTI. So again, if you're going to be at the FLC, please make it to that panel, and we'd love to talk to you about policies that can help develop federal labs and communities of innovation. Next slide. And then, as you know, the CHIPS plus Science Act, we've been talking, I think, and you'll hear a lot about the science part, but the CHIPS Act, is going to deploy, and this money is appropriated. So this is real money. and they're going to be deploying money for chip manufacturing, but there's also $11 billion for university-based microelectronic research. There's a request for information. This, unlike having a big chip manufacturing place in your backyard, this is more on the R&D. So if you're a university, I'm sure your folks in engineering and science departments are aware of this, but that's going to be a big chunk of R&D money that's going to be going out to our hopefully university members across the country. And there's going to be a National Semiconductor Technology Center. It's probably not going to be a single site. It's probably going to be multiple sites across the country. So people will be competing for that in the next year. Next slide. So that's, so there's a lot of requests for information. So I mentioned the one on NIST, EDA, some of you may know. They have seeking input on tech hubs. Again, a great way of gathering information from AURP members or others who have history of technology hubs, what works, what doesn't. And, I'd urge you to, again, respond to this RFI. You're not going to get any money from it, but it helps inform EDA, by practitioners on what works and what doesn't. So it's due by March 16th, and hope you all submit ideas regarding that. Next slide. And again, another RFI, request for information about place-based regional innovation. This about Department of Energy labs. So in many states, Department of Energy labs are large anchor institutions, and DOE is seeking information on how they might become more connected to the community. Again, no funding from this, but I think this suggests that DOE is going to be looking at ways to help involve their very large Department of Energy labs as communities of innovation. And we're going to be talking a little bit about this at the Federal Lab Consortium meeting in Cleveland at the end of March. Next slide. And then finally, I think this may be the last one. So also Department of Energy Congress created a foundation. And this is something you see on the left, the power of place. This was a policy paper I wrote many years ago, and it talked about the role of foundations for federal labs and the important way they can help connect communities to the R&D that goes on within the labs. And I'm happy to say that Department of Energy, created this new Energy Innovation Foundation, and they're asking for ideas on how it can be established and work with the community. So again, another RFI to take a look at. Next slide. So with that, there's a lot of activity, but I read Joe's paper and other papers from Brookings on analysis of the Build Back Better program and building communities through university research. So I said we need to get him on our webinar. So I'm really pleased that he was able to join us, and I look forward to hearing his discussion.
Thanks so much, Brian, and to you and your colleagues for hosting me here, and for the attendees for showing up. A few slides to walk through, and then I'm hoping we can use the remainder of the time here for discussion on these issues. I'm really keen to get the perspective of folks on this call. So I'm hoping folks can see the slides. If you can't, I can't see you, but somebody maybe shoot a chat. But if I haven't heard anything, I'll assume all is good. So as Brian said, I'm Joe Perella. I'm a fellow and director of applied research at Brookings Metro. And I'm really excited today to speak on behalf of my colleagues, Cora Haskins, who's here, and Mark Muro, who've been really great collaborators as part of a project that Brookings has been doing with the Economic Development Administration to document the early implementation of the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And so the research in this presentation, it was conducted by Brookings Metro using federal funds awarded by the Economic Development Administration and the Department of Commerce. but the statements, findings, conclusions, and recommendations are those of us and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Economic Development Administration or the U.S. Department of Commerce. So before I get to some of our findings on the Build Back Better Regional Challenge and talk a little bit about tech hubs at the end, I want to recall the context in which these programs have been designed and implemented. And for us, we go back now over 2 years ago to the summer of 2020, and the nation was in a much different place. It's mired in the depths of the pandemic and resulting recession. And that summer, Brookings Metro launched a suite of ideas aimed at spurring an equitable recovery from COVID-19. And we argued that recovery strategies, in addition to dealing with the immediate emergency, which was significant, should also establish a foundation for a more innovative and equitable post-pandemic economy. And 3 principles really governed our thinking. First, our sense was that recovery strategies should set dual mutually reinforcing goals of growth and equity, not simply pursue growth for growth's sake. Second, recovery strategies should invest in the drivers of inclusive growth, so quality jobs and industries, skilled and empowered workers, and connected and resilient communities. And then third, to invest differently, regions would need to really organize differently. They need to create broader and more diverse coalitions to implement broader and more successful strategies. So we knew such an approach would require greater capacity and thus greater resources. And in the summer of 2020, hard to remember way back then, but we had significant concerns actually about where those resources would come from. So then in March 2021, Congress passed and the president signed the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act. And this included a $3 billion appropriation to the Economic Development Administration. In July of 21, EDA announced this $1 billion Build Back Better Regional Challenge as that portfolio's flagship recovery program. And for those of you who are not familiar, the challenge really pushed regional leaders to craft strategies that, on the one hand, would develop, say, nationally critical technology clusters and industry clusters, but do so in ways that really focus on delivering economic opportunity to traditionally underserved people and communities. So its objectives, in a way, included both growth and equity. Its design encouraged regions to form new, more diverse governing coalitions, and its flexibility allowed these coalitions to invest in what they thought they needed to improve their economy over the long run. So in these ways, the challenge in the EDA's recovery portfolio as a whole, we thought very much reflected the principles of rebuilding better that we outlined in 2020. And so for these reasons and others, we thought that the challenge represented an important advancement in what we call place-based economic policies. This is a school of policymaking that seeks to benefit people and economies by targeting explicitly geographies of concern, particular places. And for both federal policymakers and regional implementers, we think there's a lot to learn from the EDA's efforts here. And so we entered into this learning partnership with the EDA. We released a big report this past fall that I co-authored with Glencore and Mark. And now we're frequently publishing these shorter pieces that document what we think are interesting and compelling regional approaches. Now, just to recap quickly, the EDA structured the challenge in 2 phases. So in phase 1, over 500 coalitions submitted very short proposals outlining what was really a high-level vision and strategy and coalition around a particular cluster. Then in phase 2, 60 regional coalitions received a $500,000 technical assistance grant to actually develop their proposals into full-fledged strategies. Then during this 3-month planning sprint, 60 regional coalitions involving 300 organizations plus designed nearly 500 projects totaling $4.3 billion in requested funding. So, such outcomes illustrate really the power and the pent-up demand that these jump ball type programs can address. And how competitive federal programs can inspire a tremendous amount of regional effort under extremely tight and ambitious deadlines. So this process, on the one hand, accelerated really widespread impact. On the other hand, it really pushed all these coalitions to their limits and really strained their capacity. EDA put in place some technical assistance, but this was a really, really high lift on the part of these 60 places. So, one level, I just wanted you to understand how the program was structured. And then at another, research universities in particular played a fundamental role in this competition. So among the 60 finalist coalitions, research universities served as the quarterback organization, the lead organization in 12, so about 1 in 5, and participated in a supporting role in another 29. So across, over 2/3 of the applicants, research universities had a role, and in about 20% of them, there was a lead role. In the end, over 1/3 of EDA's ultimate investments, so 21 coalitions were eventually awarded implementation grants. 1/3 of that nearly $1 billion was actually awarded to research universities. So they were big recipients of funds, although universities are sometimes passing those resources on to partners, particularly if they're leading coalitions. So point number one is that, research universities, perhaps obviously to you all, played this fundamental role in a big, place-based economic challenge. So how did research universities propose to use that money? So the report that Brian was referring to actually, went in, and Glencora crunched the numbers, analyzing the Build Back Better regional challenge, and seeing where universities were deploying resources across 5 categories: talent development, research and commercialization, infrastructure and placemaking, entrepreneurship and capital access, and governance. These are kind of the 5 core drivers of cluster development. So while research universities are, perhaps unsurprisingly, most concentrated in research, so that was about 41% of the funding that they received, and talent development, that was about another 1/4, they also proposed significant amounts of projects and dollars related to tailored infrastructure, particularly innovation facilities, entrepreneurship accelerators and incubators, and then even some of these kind of regional governance type projects that are about stitching coalitions together and advancing them. And that was really, what stood out most to us looking at the research university role. More than what got funded at research universities, we found it notable kind of how research universities were showing up in these strategies. As you know, catalyzing innovation clusters, it requires investing across all of these different systems: talent, research and development, entrepreneurship, and infrastructure. But regions often struggle to marshal the fiscal and political and institutional capacity needed to overcome what is some kind of inherent fragmentation within those systems, to act at what you need to, which is really this kind of idea of a multi-system scale. And operating at that multi-system scale, it requires a quarterback organization to coordinate goals and strategies and investments across those systems. So this is my photo of Patrick Mahomes to indicate the quarterback function. Many types of entities can play this role, but research universities are actually quite natural candidates due to their large scale and their critical role within these innovation ecosystems. So university utilization of these Build Back Better regional challenge dollars signifies, we think, the potential for research universities to be a fulcrum for these kind of multi-system strategies. In fact, 1/3 of the research universities in the 21 finalist coalitions proposed these kinds of multi-system strategies. So this is not, some small minority. This is 1/3 of the total research universities were trying to operate at this multi-system scale. And I want to just illustrate that with a few examples before concluding. So we'll start in New York. The New Energy New York coalition. Binghamton University is seeking to reorganize the southern tier area of upstate New York into a hub for battery manufacturing and energy storage. And the goal here is to advance a multi-system approach to strengthen the cluster's talent pool and supply chain and support a physical infrastructure. So on the workforce front, there's a comprehensive workforce development initiative. The university will partner with other coalition members in higher ed to expand existing workforce development programs and develop new training curricula around these battery opportunities. So this is going to implicate many of the region's community colleges, other research universities, It's really about reducing the cluster's barrier to entry and cultivating a diverse pool of well-trained employees to move into what will be really well-paying jobs. Binghamton University is going to supplement this workforce development effort through a supply chain program, where they're partnering with industry associations and other economic development groups to improve the supply chain. The hope is that by going at the supply chain, they're enhancing the region's demand for skilled talent, in addition to that supply side intervention I mentioned earlier. And all these initiatives are going to support Battery NY. That's the coalition's physical hub of infrastructure and industry expertise that's going to advance energy storage technology, support cluster manufacturers, and attract businesses to the region. In Georgia, so Georgia Tech led a coalition around artificial intelligence and advanced manufacturing that was awarded a significant sum of money. Again, multi-system approach. Georgia Tech is going to partner with Spelman and the Technical College System of Georgia on degree and non-degree training options. They're going to work on AI technology adoption among small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly in rural communities. So extending some of the innovation knowledge from Georgia Tech in Atlanta out into rural communities through that technology extension program. And then a significant effort out of their Enterprise Innovation Institute to stand up a Connect to Hire program that's going to really target historically excluded communities to become a pipeline for these talent development and innovation initiatives. Finally, there's an effort at Georgia Tech to kind of coalesce this around other investments in innovation facilities in important real estate. And then finally, in Nebraska, the University of Nebraska has been a major implementation partner to Invest Nebraska in standing up a Heartland robotics cluster. This is really trying to accelerate the state's agriculture technology sector. So in this case, it's Nebraska's Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is housed at the university. They're trying to identify small and mid-sized and startup manufacturers across the state, create a supply chain database, help them integrate new robotics technologies into their existing production system. This is similar to the effort at Georgia Tech, getting new technologies into small and mid-sized manufacturers. And then there's a workforce component around the extension partnership, complementing that technology adoption program with credentialing and certification to ensure that those employers are getting certified around their technology adoption, but then B, making sure there are workers that can utilize those technologies in those businesses. So in future work, we're going to really study the implementation of these comprehensive university approaches. Brookings is leading 7 in-depth case studies that all have universities involved in them to see how these strategies play out. We're just trying to see how implementation goes over the next year. But I think these 3 examples suggest a few elements that are necessary to work at a multi-system scale. So I'll just share those. One is that universities, they really have to obviously have existing innovation assets that industries value. So in each example, universities are working from existing strengths. They're not trying to build from scratch. Second, those universities need to have the staff and systems and staying power to work with other organizations in the region. So from government agencies to other higher eds, workforce boards, community-based groups. So this requires often at the university an entrepreneurial leader that can create and sustain strong working and personal relationships with other community leaders. And then that leader has to be empowered by the university's leadership to say that this is actually really important and central work to the university. And then third, both those conditions can be in place, but without money, it's hard to get something big off the ground. So we're seeing that there has to be this external funding source, such as a federal or even a state program that can rally regional actors around a more ambitious strategy. In this case, the Build Back Better Regional Challenge provided exactly that type of jump ball funding effect. So BBBRC was the first, but certainly not the last of these opportunities. Mark led work that estimated nearly $80 billion in authorized place-based industrial competitiveness programs across the American Rescue Plan Act, CHIPS and Science, and the Infrastructure Bill. How did we arrive at that number? So we were looking at programs that met two criteria. So one, they are a form of industrial policy or industrial strategy, meaning they're trying to encourage economic transformation through interventions in specific industries. So these are programs that are trying to intentionally shift the economy really from a lower productivity state to a higher productivity state. But then they're also place-based in that they're forms of policy that deliberately target interventions toward particular locations. And intention is what matters here. Programs have to be thinking geographically almost, or spatially. They're thinking about local ecosystems and clusters and so forth. And the way I think about this is that, a lot of these programs, even something like the big CHIPS NOFO that was announced last week to build semiconductor fabs, that's ostensibly a national security effort, but for it to be successful, the US has to build clusters of leading semiconductor knowledge and production capabilities. And that's really about regions. It's about building those place-based concentrations of talent and companies and university-based knowledge. And so we think this place-based industrial policy framework is actually really useful to guide universities as they think about the landscape of opportunities, and particularly, what their regional economic impact could be. And then, of course, the next big offering coming from EDA is regional technology hubs. So this was authorized by the CHIPS and Science Act. Tech Hubs is going to focus on technology development, job creation, entrepreneurial development, and expanding innovation capacity. And of the 10 billion authorized, so 10 billion of the 80 billion or so is Tech Hubs. Of the 10 billion that's been authorized, 500 million has been made available for the initial round. And as Brian said, there's an RFI that's out. And we're going to respond to it. I encourage you all to respond to it as well. They're definitely looking for feedback on how to get that program right. I'm looking at this stage of Tech Hubs across a couple of different lenses. So at one level, I think Congress was acknowledging that regional tech hubs has to respond to kind of mission critical national challenges around technology and innovation. So this often has overlap with national economic security. A lot of the work around semiconductors has been framed in national security terms. I think that's a really important thing to keep top of mind as you're thinking about applying to tech hubs, is that the federal government is increasingly adopting an industrial strategy and has all sorts of kind of national level objectives that they want even place-based programs to contribute up to. Industry modernization is a critical part of that. So the congressional language around tech hubs talks about the modernization and expansion of manufacturing, improving the pace of market readiness and industry maturation in critical technologies, improving commercialization, innovative research. These are things that I'm sure you all are familiar with through your work with urban research parks and innovation districts. The final part, of course, is the regional angle. So explicitly, Tech Hubs is trying to not just double down on the winners in the innovation economy. They are trying to seed the next generation of winners in the innovation economy. And so this means thinking about a lot of things, both geographically. There are requirements in Tech Hubs around implications for small cities and rural areas, for low population states. There's a requirement that different EDA regions each get a certain amount of tech hubs. So the EDA regions loom large here in terms of who you're competing with. And then there's also kind of nods within the language to issues of inclusion and economic opportunity, thinking about not just the where, but the who benefits from the next wave of technology development. And so I think the strongest tech hub proposals will be mindful of all these criteria. They'll try to crosswalk against them and build up, comprehensive long-term innovation strategies that satisfy as many of these conditions as possible. So let me stop there and take any questions or hear other people's thoughts about the moment. I'll stop sharing slides and open it up for discussion.
Great. Diana or Vicky, I assume they should put questions in the Q&A or chat, or which one?
Yes, they can put it in the Q&A.
Yeah. So I just wanted, great presentation. You know, 2 out of the 3 people, case studies are AURP members. We hope to get Binghamton as one of our members. Actually, a person from Binghamton is coming to ARPA-E in our reception. I'm sure our University City Science Center folks in Philadelphia grimaced a little bit when you used the metaphor of your quarterback.
Oh yeah, shots fired.
Painful for them, I'm sure.
Sorry.
But anyway, but so Glencore and Joe, you know, that was great. I was curious. Well, one other comment is we mentioned our BioHealth Caucus. So the 5 bio winners, which were from New Hampshire, Missouri, Virginia, North Carolina, Oklahoma. We hope they're going to present at our BioHealth Caucus, you know, talking about what where they are, what they've learned from the process in terms of the bio piece. But so I want to talk a little bit about the NSF Engines program, which, you know, we've been talking a lot about the EDA. Do you see, and this has been a discussion point, NSF Engines and EDA tech hubs, they seem complementary, but are they competitive? What would you say to, do you see distinctions and any role, you know, match funding? So a lot of times lower income communities have problems with making any match. I don't think the EDA required any match, but you know, that's been an issue for a lot of federal funding programs. What would you say about match requirements from local governments or local institutions?
So EDA for Build Back Better Regional Challenge did require match. I believe it was a 20% roughly match requirement. So there's a decent amount of local and state bootstrapping that has to occur, I think, with these big place-based programs, because the federal government wants to make sure that there's leverage and that, you know, these organizations and governments have some skin in the game as well. So so that's on match, but I hear your point about just, you know, some of the challenges and perhaps inequities that are built into the competitive challenge grant model, right? Not everybody is starting from the same starting point. Not everybody has the same amount of kind of latent capacity to go after one of these very high effort grants. Not everybody has the resources to provide the match. And so, you know, we've seen some work out of other federal programs around pre-development and technical assistance to support communities that are looking for just even simple supports, like how do I put together a grant application? What's going to be a compelling way to do this? And, you know, EDA has been, is actually thinking about a recovery core program that will put, you know, human capital, these fellows in different regions to support with some of this recovery work. So I think that is hugely, hugely important, particularly as you think about the role of these programs in helping lift up left behind regions that may not have as many assets to draw upon. With respect to just this entire constellation of programs, right? There is, you know, they're all kind of similar, but they each have their own, I would say, lane, right? So NSF Innovation Engines is pretty long-term in the time horizon for that funding. It's further upstream, and then I think they're thinking more about true kind of research and innovation ecosystems where you're generating knowledge, hopefully like startup companies that are earlier stage, higher risk, acknowledging that there's probably not going to be maybe immediate, like large job creation benefits coming out of that, although of course they would love to see those things. So it's a little further upstream in the innovation life cycle. Build Back Better Regional Challenge, or even something like Recompetes, which is another EDA program that is about really distressed areas, about basically improving employment rates in parts of the country that have very low employment rates. That's very much a labor market problem and a labor market program. The Build Back Better Regional Challenge was kind of a mix of the two. They were saying that, look, we want to drive a strong recovery. We think we can actually invest in some foundational technology and industry clusters as we do that, because that's really where good jobs are going to come from. They wanted some near-term outcomes for sure because of the recovery angle, but acknowledged that cluster development takes time as well. So it's a 5-year program that probably won't have impact immediately, but will play out over kind of the near term through like a 10-year time horizon. And then tech hubs is kind of in the middle of that entire spectrum. I think it's probably closer to engines than it is to recompete in the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. It's firmly about like technological competitiveness. And it's acknowledging that I think there's a smaller set of places that you can kind of grow what they think of as a really leading self-sustaining innovation cluster on par with, say, like Research Triangle Park or where Austin has gotten, to say nothing of Boston or the Bay Area. So I think whereas the Build Back Better Regional Challenge geographic footprint was really distributed across a wide range of places, urban, rural, less distressed, more distressed, I think tech hubs is going to be actually looking for more of those fundamental innovation inputs. And as a result, it'll be places that may be different than traditional EDA programs, don't look as distressed as you would think EDA would want to see in investing in a program, because they want to make sure that there's a minimum viable innovation product there, that with a kind of influx of significant numbers, of dollars, you can level up to be a self-sustaining innovation cluster. So I hope that makes sense, but it's
yeah. So can I ask a question for Glencore? Since I think you did the analysis of the Build Back Better, one thing we're very interested in is facilities, right? And I think you've analyzed and you showed that I think it was 10%, actually went to facilities. And one of our big ideas is we think there should be more public-private partnerships. So not necessarily the university has to own a new facility, but if you want tech hubs to, because for a university to get a new building through the state or whatever, we're talking about a decade. So we're hoping the EDA and other government agencies understand that many of our members have public-private partnerships where the private sector can build an incubator or can build a research facility or a test bed much more quickly and through leasing or other kinds of arrangements. But so I was curious, you also said there were a certain percent went to incubators. Was that to run the incubator or was that to build an incubator? I don't know if you could tell from their applications.
Sure. So the one thing I want to make sure we clarify is all of the budget documentation that we have is based on the original proposals. So we have about 1/3 of funding actually going to the universities, and that's just based on the award data. The driver analysis that you saw in an earlier slide is based on the budget requests made in phase 2 by those universities. So the actual award may differ somewhat. More to your point, we tried to categorize projects based on their eventual intent rather than just solely whether they were infrastructure or non-infrastructure based. So that incubator category would include building and operating incubators in most circumstances.
Great. So we have a question in the chat about what about states and regions that have multiple industry clusters and could support multiple tech hubs? I mean, for example, in the state of Maryland, we have a big cybersecurity cluster because we have NSA. We also have a big biotech cluster because we have NIH. And I know we didn't win either. So but what about those regions that do have these multiple clusters? Any thoughts on how they should position themselves? Just pick one and stay in that swim lane, or any thoughts you guys have on that?
Yeah, we saw, states, speaking for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge context, like North Carolina had 2 submissions. One eventually got funded, the biotech cluster, but they had a advanced manufacturing play as well. So it's possible for states to kind of get awarded as finalists, like multiple coalitions in a state. Oklahoma got 2 awards. So both Tulsa and Oklahoma City were awarded grants. For tech hubs, that's not going to happen. I can't imagine, given the small number of tech hubs that will actually get financed, that they'll have 2 in the same state. So it's kind of a question of strategy at that point. Like, do state governments want to be kind of organizing people around one collective effort, or prioritizing one over the other, you know, that's tough at times. So I undoubtedly states will be like putting multiple tech hub proposals forward, particularly in the big states. But I doubt that you'll get multiple tech hubs funded in a state.
Great. So we have another comment from Phil Hochberger, excuse me, about the role of community colleges. So, you know, community colleges are very agile. They're very, they pay attention to the local workforce, and they can develop degrees and things and pivot very quickly. And not just community colleges, technical colleges, and lots of other, you know, similar non-R1, non-R2 research universities. How can they be involved in these programs? And due to your analysis, were they central? And, you know, I know the Good Jobs Challenge had a lot more community colleges in it than the Build Back Better, but any comment about the role of community colleges and technical colleges?
Yeah, they were fundamental to Build Back Better Regional Challenge as well. So fully endorse the questioner's kind of premise that, particularly for you know, economic mobility purposes, community colleges can be engines for that. You know, the evidence suggests that if you can attune community college programs to in-demand industries that have significant labor market demand, and you provide the proper outreach and support to those learners, you know, that is the special sauce of upward economic mobility. And a great example that Glencore and I are profiling right now is in North Carolina, which is creating a biopharma training short course to prepare North Carolinians, many of whom will only have a high school degree, for, you know, $50,000 a year jobs in biopharmaceutical manufacturing facilities that are growing like crazy in the Research Triangle and across the state. So what's innovative about their work is they've created a network. They're going to have, I think, a half dozen of these training hubs, standardized curricula, but they're embedding in a range of community colleges as well as HBCUs and MSIs, minority serving institutions, to ensure that there's both geographic diversity in that outreach and demographic diversity in that outreach. And so I think that is the future. And one of the most interesting parts of looking at the research university role was how they were starting to plug into these broader higher education consortiums that leverage the power and assets of research universities, as well as HBCUs, MSIs, and then these technical and community college that are, you know, offering 2-year and certificate programs as well. So we want to do something on that entire collaborative structure that's emerging. I think that is really compelling approach that can be replicated across the country.
I think Vicki wants to come in and talk about the states and regions. Vicki? Maybe not. Okay, well, what about how many, I don't know if I actually saw this in the RFI tech hubs. Do you have any idea how many would be funded? Is that, has there been speculation in terms of the amount of tech hubs that might be funded?
I believe the entire 10 billion, if it were appropriated, which is a big if, I should stress that, the ceiling on the number of tech hubs would be 20 with that entire $10 billion appropriation. As far as how this 500 million will get distributed, you know, that's going to be something that is really up to EDA, and I don't think we've got a great line of sight on that yet.
All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we're winding down the hour. Any closing comments you want to make before we're going to end up with a couple slides and talk about some of our programming coming up?
I just love to keep an open dialogue going with your organization and with your members, to the extent that they have questions that have been sparked by this. You know, we're going to be at it for the rest of the year, doing these kind of short, rapid response pieces that are using the Build Back Better Regional Challenge as kind of a learning opportunity. But the goal is really to influence a much broader range of actors than just those that are in that program. And I consider your membership just like a fundamentally important audience for us. So I would love to share my contact info in some way if possible and keep the dialogue open.
Well, great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Vicki and Aaron.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe and Glencora and Aaron and Brian for being on today. Yes, definitely. We'll be sharing information. We'll be sharing your slides and the recording from today's calls. But yeah, we definitely want to keep that dialogue open with you and appreciate your time today. I just wanted to share about some upcoming opportunities to partner with AURP and our membership. I know Diane was going to bring that up. So we just returned from a stellar spring training program. We had our colleagues from Georgia Tech and from Tech Parks, Arizona that were our chairs. Great program in Tempe. So we'll be there again next year. We had the BioHealth Caucus, which Aaron had mentioned earlier today. And then our annual conference will be in Delaware at Star Campus this fall. And actually watch for the call for presentation proposals, which will be going out actually tomorrow. And we'll be giving some different details on tracks and information that, you know, to really bring success to your proposal and showcasing it to our membership. Just a reminder and a couple other opportunities with the organization. We 2 weeks ago, I guess now, released our online on-demand 101 Communities of Innovation 101 program with 9+ modules and case studies to learn among our peers. I believe there was over 23 speakers. So, and Aaron Koshut was chair for that program. So thank you again for your leadership there. We talked about the Air and Space Caucus as well, and we'll be rolling out the Clean Energy and Building Resilience program again at the conference. And then just a reminder about our regional partnership development program, again, which is essentially a scholarship program for partnership opportunities for our members. We're working with HBCUs, MSI, and HSI institutions, really providing a scholarship to bring them into our events and membership and really help them engage with our members and grow that sector. So look forward to that and other partnership opportunities with you all. So Aaron, do you have any closing comments?
I'd just like to say thanks for joining us today. And I think it was a wealth of content, which if you have not been exposed to a lot of AURP programming, that's what you come to expect from AURP, and a lot of ways to plug in and get engaged, grow your network, build your knowledge around these topic areas. And we appreciate you joining us and being a part of the network. And we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good day.